Meghan Kasperlik, welcome to the Words Daily podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. So, your work on Mare of Easttown is obviously of modern era in terms of costuming, right? This is not a sci-fi project. This is not a fantasy project, both of which are in your background as a costume designer. What do you find it harder to design clothes for the modern era, for or for fantasy or fantasy or period pieces?
I find it's both have their challenges and both are can also be very exciting. I really love doing both fantasy and also doing contemporary pieces because I think what's really important is the character development that happens within contemporary pieces that people don't realize that sometimes that super space suit that you're doing is just as hard as creating a real like the whole character look for someone, for example, like Kate Winslet in Mare of Easttown. I really wanted to make sure that I was really getting it authentic as possible. So there are challenges to both, but there are exciting moments in both. And I feel that once you find that character in that fitting room, it's very, very telling that like I did a couple of fittings with Kate. And as soon as we kind of got this really, um, I want to say generic t-shirt on her that Kate Winslet herself would never wear, but her character Mare would wear. Like once we went there and kind of put this thing that like, wouldn't be appropriate in Hollywood standards, when she had it on, she started to feel the character and you could see it. And that was exciting. That was really exciting.
Excellent. I get so frustrated when I see when you, particularly in the awards conversation, when you look at outside of the costumers guild, of course, but when you look at Oscars and Emmys and things like that, all the costumes are fantasy costumes. They're period pieces, but there is an art to doing contemporary costumes, and it just
Yeah.
seems to be so often omitted from awards conversations. So um, with Mayor of Easttown, I know you had to do a lot of research. You wanted to, and one of my favorite things about the show is how authentic it feels. Tell me about doing that research in Wawa. I heard you would go
Yeah.
into Wawa with cameras and things like that. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, Brad Inglesby, who's the writer of the show, he is actually from Aston, Pennsylvania, where we filmed, and our studio was, and where we filmed, and I kept hearing Wawa, 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 and I'm from New York, or I live in New York, and so I was like, yeah, I mean, I've heard of Wawa, but and everyone's like, no, you just have to go to Wawa and have a Wawa experience. So when I went, I thought, oh my God, I haven't seen people this authentic and this real since I'm from the Midwest. And I was like, this is just like when I was in college and people would be going to their jobs in the morning and be in like their work clothes. They would be college students going in their pajamas to pick up a soda, or get a hoagie, or I highly recommend the Wawa pretzel. So I was doing that, and I would go, and this is pre-COVID, so I would go and I would sit, and then I would go into I did go into the store, and I very cautiously took pictures of people, but I didn't publish any of them, or
Right.
it was just for our research. I went to a number of like the local, like the pizza place, and I went to the local. Um, I just went to a lot of local places, like the local sandwich shop and the local. Like I went to different places, like downtown Philly, but which was, the city part is a lot different from the suburbs. So I just tried to hit up as many places as like what the story was kind of talking about.
Mhm.
And we filmed in a lot of surrounding areas of Philly. So I would go to each like community and go to their local stores and see what people were like selling and shopping and buying and stuff there, because I just wanted it to be really real.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely comes across. You talked earlier about Kate putting on that t-shirt, really helping her find the character of Mare, because it's so different than what she would normally wear in her day-to-day life. Did you work with, all of the actors to kind of figure out what their looks would be? Did they have inputs on the look? Is that a collaborative process for you as a costume designer?
Yes, I try to make it as collaborative with the actor and I, and then also the director, and even if the writer is available. Sometimes the writers are on the location, sometimes they're not. But I really work closely with the actor and kind of talk through their thought process, my thought process, what's in the script, but the script doesn't always have like the backstory. So I like to have a backstory with each actor, and I really like to have the little details. It was very challenging to make Kate Winslet not look like Kate Winslet, because she's such a stunning individual that also working with her hair and makeup person, it was really detrimental to like us working together as a team to really pull that look out. And then also with like Julianne Nicholson, she in this it was scripted that she had a Dave Matthews t-shirt on.
Oh, wow.
And she so that was scripted, and I was like, oh, this is, you have to get clearance and everything. And I thought, if this is the type of character that she is, and she was going to Dave Matthews band concerts when she was in like college, we need to have that from college. What was the band doing at what year was that? What tour was that? We need to make sure we have that one that when she would have been in college, when that character would have been in college. And then from there, it doesn't really say so much like the history of that family, but I was like, I always ask the questions of, what does this family do? Like, what is their job? What is their income? Where do they come from? I ask a lot of questions to make it as authentic as possible.
Excellent. One thing with Kate, with her character of Mare, I noticed in the first couple of episodes when you don't know much about her, you're just getting more of her day to day. She's wearing a lot of, of course it's Pennsylvania, but she's wearing a lot of heavy outfits. She's always clothed. She's got layers, multiple layers. As the series progresses, you start to find out more about her. You learn more about her backstory. You do start to see her in more revealing things, sleeveless or short sleeve dresses when she goes out with Guy Pearce's character. Was that intentional, that the costuming would then reflect her trajectory as a character through the series?
I did it more as a detective, you're never exposing yourself for who you are. And it's a small town, so everyone really knows a lot about you. But as a detective, you're like, you're not the person who's on display. You're trying to help and trying to find. So I always wanted to make her like not be exposed when she was out in the field. And so it was slightly intentional of just kind of opening up but it wasn't supposed to be overly dramatic. It was just supposed to be like slight. But really the detective look was to be more like closed off to people.
Okay. With Evan Peters, Detective Zobel, what kind of look were you trying to go for him? What do those choices infer about his character?
I originally had a much different approach to his character, and Evan is like he's a very character actor. So we talked a lot about, and we had like a very different look in the beginning. And then after kind of going through it with Brad and the director, it was just kind of like, this isn't maybe necessarily the people who live in Pennsylvania. I wanted to make it so true to who the people were. So his backstory, I got a little bit of a backstory for his character, and I thought, I always want to make things like look appealing and look interesting. And I think any costume designer wants to have just a little extra something in there, but sometimes it's better to just pull back. So the idea then, after having a lot of chatting about it and talking about it, is that his character is just your standard basic guy who thinks he's wearing like a really nice suit.
Right.
And like, he can't be flashy, but like, this is the nice suit.
Right.
And it's nicer than what the normal detectives probably wear in like a sport jacket and whatnot. But it's not overly super flashy. So that was really important, I think, to everyone to really tell that versus it being super, super flashy and more of like we should be talking about his character and what the character is doing, not about his costume. So I had to pull back a little bit on that one.
Right. Well, when I look at him, I think about, and of course, I don't want to give any spoilers away for perhaps viewers who haven't gotten this far in the show, but he does have a secret that gets revealed midway of the season. And I kept thinking about, okay, he's going to want to dress a certain way so that he can make himself look bigger than he is, in terms of more successful than he is, and than his legacy has belied. Hopefully I didn't spoil anything. Anyway, my last question for you is, as you look at the costumes across the series, were there anything that was a an explicitly difficult challenge to solve, or a challenging look, a difficult look across any of the characters that you really, had a problem settling on?
I think I think there was, I don't want to quite give it away. There was like one jacket that one of the characters wears, in which it was a little bit challenging because how are we going to film it? Are we going to
Mhm.
film it at night? And how much light? Like, I'm very concerned about how much light is going to hit the costume, and what we're going to see and whatnot. So there was a little bit of there was a long conversation about this specific character and why this character was wearing this specific color. Um, and so there was that was the one costume that even to this day I still think about it, and I thought, did we make the right decision? Just knowing that there was a couple of different options, and everybody had talking points about it. So I think there was one jacket that really still gets me.
Yeah, that's interesting though that you mentioned the lighting, because a lot of this does take place at night. A lot of this takes place in woods without a lot of, it's and obviously it was lit, but there's not, moonlight, and there's not a lot of natural lighting, so that does become more challenging for things to stick out, right? Does that influence your color selection, so that perhaps it does pop a little bit more, but not too much to look outrageous on the character, to feel wrong?
Yeah, it was particularly challenging in on this show because everything had to look lived in and blended without looking dirty and muddy and
Mhm.
whatnot. So Kate's character is not supposed to be a person who lives in filth. We still want to see a bit of texture, but she doesn't. I never wanted her to wear bright clothing. Um, so it was a excuse me, a really fine balance of how we're going to make that happen. And it was really across the board with many of the characters, because I don't know if you've been to Pennsylvania, but it's either like a lot of sports wear, which is
Right.
bright and colorful, or there's kind of more of the worker wear aspect. So there's one or the other, and it's not usually. I never wanted things to be. It's not a bright world that Mare is living in. It's not a bright scenario for the whole community. So it was always to be dark. So a lot of texture had to be put into like all of the costumes, and there was also a lot of texture in the sets. So kind of how do you balance the texture of the set with the texture of the costume without it being very jarring? So that was um that was a good challenge, and I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about wanting things to feel lived in. That is exactly how I would describe many of these costumes. Everything does feel, exceptionally lived in, and authentic. Authenticity is just such a huge key for the show, and you really, um, every aspect of it just feels tremendously authentic. So, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, Megan, thank you so much for the time. This was a pleasure, and best of luck to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Really nice to meet you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.